Hello, my name is Simon from CramTheExam and welcome to another English exam question video where I walk you through an English exam question telling you what the answers are and why the answers are the answers. Today we're going to have a look at the reading question, the gap text question, which is part 7 of the use of English exam for the advanced paper. This particular question is from the flowjo.co.uk website. If you haven't checked it out already, please do so. Full of resources and exam practice for you to get ready for your advanced and FCE and other English exams. Okay, part 7. It's a gap text question. What you've got to do is read through the gap text and then choose the correct paragraph to go into each gap. Of course, read through the gap text first to get a good idea of what's going on, the people who are involved, what the story's about, order, context, and so on, so on. Once you've read through the gap text, then go to the suggested paragraphs and see if you can make links in terms of context, order, and indeed of vocabulary, because we're looking for vocabulary links as well, to make sure you choose the correct paragraph for each question. So let's have a look at this part 7 question. We're talking about networking events, and the opening paragraph begins, or rather the second paragraph says, at networking events I will often look to start a conversation with people who are on their own. It's much easier than breaking into a group conversation, and the chances are they won't tell you to leave them alone and go away. Very few people go to networking events for solitude. So what can we take away from here? I will often look to start a conversation with people who are on their own. And the people who are on their own won't tell you to leave and go away. So the paragraph that follows would naturally talk about people who are on their own and perhaps how you would start a conversation with these people. And indeed, that's exactly what we can find in D, because it says you can often find these people referring to people on their own. And indeed, it says here, nervous people on their own. And that these people are indeed trying to find the courage to approach someone themselves. So what we've got here is a clear vocabulary, or set of vocabulary links and a contextual link between the opening paragraph and this paragraph. Indeed, this follows after the gap, because it says when approaching these people, and then it goes on to explain why that's the case when you approach people who are on their own. Indeed, the answer even gives you topics for you to discuss when approaching people on their own. So, perfect fit for question number 1 is D. This paragraph then goes on to how happy these people are, or how perhaps easy it is for to start talking to people on their own. And after the gap, we've got the situation where we are now speaking to them. It says here, having spoken to them, try not to leave them on their own again. So we're looking for something to fit contextually between the idea of approaching someone and talking to them. So perhaps we might think about this in terms of logical order of how the story goes. And indeed, hang on a second. And if I scroll on down, we can see that this is what we can see in E. E talks about before you meet them and the process of actually meeting them. So it logically fits in the gap between the two. When you do approach them, the people on their own, approach them in an appropriate way. Don't just run up to them saying, so what do you do then? And indeed, this is the question that is referred to here, having spoken to them. So here, for question number 2, the answer is E. For question number 3, we've got to carry on reading. As always, we've got to be aware of the whole text. And for question number 3, it says, it's talking about talking, if someone is talking and you interrupt. And then it says you're talking about their group. So we're beginning to shift away, or the idea might be that we're shifting away from people who are on their own, and now we're approaching people in the group, in groups. So we've got to look for a paragraph that kind of sits in the middle of that flow or that logical order. And indeed, we can see that in F, because F says if you see a group of people talking, approach the group. So F is actually the change in direction in the story. So it introduces the idea of talking to people in the group, which fits into the text, particularly the text following the gap. And indeed, it tells you in here there's a difference between including yourself in other people's conversations and intruding on them. So this fits into the narrative about how to get into a group conversation. If we have a look at the general idea, the context, it says stand on the edge of the group and wait for the appropriate time. So here it's talking about how to get involved in that conversation. And then here, interestingly, it says alternatively. So what this is saying is that it gives you a second option, which means that this first option of how perhaps you would break the ice or how you would get into that group conversation should be in this gap for number 4. And if we have a look at the answer for number 4, we can indeed see that with B. B says the easiest way to approach a group is to catch the eye of one of the participants and smile. Usually they should invite you to join them at the appropriate juncture. So here this is saying, this is giving you one way to get into a conversation which is already underway in a group. And that makes sense when you have a look at alternatively, because alternatively gives you a different way of introducing yourself into that group conversation, in where you actually make the effort yourself to get involved. So here, for question number 4, the answer is B. If we go on to look at the text further, the rest of this paragraph talks about interrupting the conversation to get into the conversation. It advises you, but this last sentence is interesting. It almost is like a conclusion to the idea, but it's always best to wait for the right pause in conversation. So to me, this is saying it doesn't matter if you do the first idea or the second idea. In general, in conclusion, perhaps we can say, it's always best to wait for the right pause in conversation. After this gap for number 5, it talks about the above guidelines. So if we think about it from the point of logical flow, what's going to be in number 5 is another guideline of some kind. And if we have a look at the answer for number 5, which is A, it is another guideline. The one thing I would try to avoid is approaching two people together. So it's telling you, having told you what to do and two possible options, it's now telling you what not to do. So this forms one of the 3 guidelines presented in this text. There is also a vocabulary link here, which is perhaps is noticeable, where this talks about 2 people talking together. So this isn't a group, this is a couple, and this is mentioned in the in the text afterwards, where it says whether in couples or groups, which is a little bit of a tenuous link. It's more of a stronger argument to say that this is the 3rd guideline out of 3. So if we have a look at the text after the gap for number 6, it says reading this body language may mean that you are better advised approaching 2 people rather than a group. So here we're talking about body language. Indeed, this idea of body language begins before the gap. So people will always send very clear signals about approachability by the way they're standing. So number 6 really should be something to do with body language. And if we have a look, there we go, managed to get it right. If we have a look at G, that's exactly what we see. Clear vocabulary link here. If their body language is closed, you should avoid interrupting them, etc., etc. So this G fits very nicely into the context, as well as giving us plenty of vocabulary links. Okay, I hope you enjoyed my walkthrough of the video. If you've got any questions or comments, or indeed if you disagree with anything that I've said, please leave a comment below. I'm more than happy to have that conversation with you. And of course, if you want to practice any more exam questions, check out my YouTube channel or Facebook page, where you'll see plenty more practice for you to do. If you're studying for your exam using one of the course books, Gold Advanced, Gold First, Ready for Advanced, Ready for First, Advanced Expert or First Expert, I've got exactly the same walkthrough videos on my website, CramTheExam.com, where for a very small monthly fee, really very small monthly fee, you can get access to all of the videos for all of those course books, so you can study for your exam as quickly as you wish. Okay, I'll see you again soon.